Hello, and welcome to Book Circle. I'm Earl Wyenberg. This time we will continue our reading of Aunt Jenny and the Delayed Quest. Aunt Jenny has reached Ilum Crown, the capital of Faerie, and is in conference with Queen Maeve. Chapter 12, Aunt Jenny's Journey to Patala. The next day was rather chaotic. After their dinner, Aunt Jenny and Queen Maeve started making plans. A group of Maeve's people, a healer, a mage, a shipwright, and a handful of rumblers, sailed with supplies to the Shattered Isle, taking the dream skiff with them. They would attempt to rescue Vivian and Vrayan and repair the Rook. At the very least, they would leave Morwenna the skiff. Once the aid had been settled on, the discussion returned to the question of the artifacts, or substitutes for the lost items. "Well," said Aunt Jenny, "you said that the serpent folk might be prepared to assist in assembling a thing of power with which to defeat her, if that meant the retrieval of the serpent's eye and the return of their crown intact?" "It seems possible. They have fought her for eons, with no avail for either. If they believe that you can fulfill the prophecy and deliver her a defeat, then they might see it to their advantage. But no Fae can speak for them or to what they might really do." "Then it seems I've no choice but to go to them seeking help." She pulled out Albahint's maps and asked, "How do I get to them, to Patala?" Maeve frowned. "That is no easy task. Look to your maps. What say they of the lands dawnward of here?" "It's rather a hodgepodge, and not too promising. Here there be dragons, a trackless jungle, burning wastes to the north, lost kingdoms." Sasha interjected, "All the sorts of things that ancient maps used to say when they really meant damned if I know." "True enough," said Aunt Jenny with a smile. "There are reasons for that, I'll warrant," said Maeve, hearkening back to times when the veil between worlds has been thin and shifting. Then would dragons be seen in mortal lands, realms lost or returned, and those same legends appear in this map for similar reasons. That area, from Patala through the place of reeds and the great jungle to the open sea, is one of the places where the veil is most often thin. 'Tis also where the Halfland's geography is least stable. The Chaos Marches are dawnward of the Halflands, and that area borders both on them and Faelands." "Ah, back to being pixelated." "Pixelated?" asked Sasha. "Pixie-led, not visible pixels. I was discussing it with Albahint. It seems like ages ago, but really it was just the other day. In any event, Faerie geography is reportedly not very stable either, if stories can be believed, little Jenny's and many others." "Exactly. Between Chaos and Faerie, those are shifting lands," explained Maeve. "They are also places of great conflict and shifting dominion. It is home to lizard men and dragon folk, great apes and stone giants, lost cities and realms of human folk. The Lamia have made numerous incursions, then been driven out again. The way from here to Patala is fraught and uncertain." "Delightful," said Jenny. "What's our best course, then?" "By boat, I would say. Sail from here to the River of Gold, thence up the river past the towers of Iram. Then take the Malula, the Mother of Waters, to the dome of Patala itself. Much of the territory you will travel through is controlled by the various dragon and serpent folk, none of whom are fond of Faerie, so you may be best advised to go without escort beyond the lake itself. Iram is the exception. Their ruling council is mostly human, with members from a number of other races. Largely they are allies of ours. Still, it is a large city, and you may be recognized by unfriendly folk. It would be prudent not to be seen by many in there. However, should you find yourself in need of assistance, seek it in Aram. Because they wanted to pass as unremarked as possible when they departed the next day, Sasha and Aunt Jenny concealed their armor, some of Ilum Crown's finest, light elven chainmail and intricately woven multi-layered spider silk padding, beneath more rustic, loose-fitting outer garb. Sasha, who had practiced with skathach and mail, had an outfit that included a full suit of chain over silk padding and a solid breastplate and helmet. Aunt Jenny confined herself to a combination of spider silk and a light mail shirt. Since the plan was to travel by water, Kat insisted on carrying them. Despite her name, she was more of a gaff-rigged ketch than a catboat, with 2 masts and a somewhat cozy cabin. With Aunt Jenny, Sasha, 3, and the Rumblers, Rollibat and Geralt, 2 cats and a dog, and supplies for everyone, the accommodations were a little tight, but not uncomfortably so. They set sail from the Harbor Royal with little fanfare and proceeded dawnward across the Great Lake to the mouth of the River of Gold, a journey of a day and a half, then most of another day up the river to the towered city of Iram. By then, the close quarters were beginning to lose their charm, and they decided that the women, 3, and the animals would spend the evening in a small dockside inn that the cat and the Rumblers said should be safe and discreet. Geralt accompanied them to the inn, carrying a bit of luggage for them, and once they were settled in, returned to Cat, carrying supper for himself and Rollibat. Aunt Jenny, Sasha, and 3 dined in the common room on bread, cheese, and mutton, and washed down with a sweet red wine. Even though they had only walked a short distance from the docks to the inn after sailing into Iram and were still outside the main wall, the city had made quite an impression. "This is some place," Sasha exclaimed once the food had arrived. "Sort of a 1001 Nights on Mongo. Or Aladdin's Journey to Tomorrowland," laughed Aunt Jenny. 3 smiled broadly, nodding as if he got the joke. "Retrofuturism and postmodern Arabian Nights fantasy are definite influences," Jenny added. "Or maybe, somehow, Iram influences our fiction." Sasha nodded, dipping her bread in her stew. "Queen Maeve said there are a lot of humans in charge here. From what I've seen, you can sort of tell that by comparing the architecture and city plans of Ilum Crown and Iram. There are towers and domes and blockier buildings in both, but Ilum Crown has a more delicate and otherworldly look. This place is more solid and reminds me of places back home, both real and fictional. Ilum Crown is just alien. That wasn't as obvious when we were there, but seeing this town?" Aunt Jenny looked around and nodded. After another bite of stew, she said, "You're right. The materials here, the wood, stone, and stucco, they all look familiar, even if the style isn't like anywhere I've seen before. The Wolf Dales and the Shadowed Isle were like that too, and the manse as well, even more familiar. They could all have been in the British Isles, Germany, and the Lowlands or New England. This place is a bit more exotic, but still familiar in a way." Sasha agreed. "Yeah, this is a bit foreign, but Ilum Crown was strange. Makes you wonder what Patala and Jinistan will be like." "If you told me that this," Sasha waved at the inn around her, "was in Morocco, or Flash Gordon's Mongo, or John Carter's Mars, I could believe you." She looked down at her bowl. "Do they have mutton on Mars or Mongo?" Aunt Jenny laughed. "Probably not. On the other hand, I doubt Morocco has this many races." "Did you see that stone giant unloading down on the docks? What does 9 feet of stone like that weigh? And how the heck does it move?" "Our boat talks to us and can guide herself." "Well, there's that. And she's pretty good at organizing. She was a big help in planning this trip. Though I suppose that's not too strange. She hauls cargo and people and has to be at least a century and a quarter old, if not older still." That's right, she knew your great-aunt Jenny. She's got a lot of experience. Suddenly they were interrupted. "Ah, lady," said an unfamiliar voice, an inebriated fellow, thumping his hands too heavily down on their table and leaning in toward them. "You're looking like you need a bit of company." He leered in a way that he seemed to feel was endearing. Sasha set down the knife she'd been using to cut a slice of cheese, leaned forward, and fixed him with a steely stare. "No," she said in a soft, low voice, edged with menace. His eyes widened a little, and he ran what started as an appraising gaze over her form, but seemed to fix on the bits of armor that were visible beneath her loose-fitting robe, before focusing on the sword hanging from her belt. My mistake. My apologies, ladies," he muttered and backed away. "Whoa, did I just do that?" asked Sasha. "What, menace him like a warrior trained by Skathak herself and make him back down?" Aunt Jenny nodded approvingly. "Wow, yeah, that. I always hoped my girls would be able to take good care of themselves and each other, but yes, that was impressive. We are so not in Kansas anymore. Nor quite the folk we were back in Winston," Jenny agreed. "Does that mean that this mission we are on isn't crazy?" "Well, no crazier than having dinner in Aladdin's Mongo on a trip arranged by our talking boat." "Oh, good. No crazier than that. Well, maybe it's just the mate to King Arthur's 2 swords that you're carrying, and you're still the same girl who was planning to head to college in a few months." "Right, that's probably it. I just read about things like this, not do them." "Look, my dear, you're still the same Sasha who lounged in the chair in my yard and read vociferously." "Right, that's probably it. I just read about things like this, not do them." "Look, my dear, you're still the same Sasha who lounged in the chair in my yard and read voraciously, but you're that girl and so much more." Sasha answered only with silence. "Do you know how surprised I was when I saw you standing next to Skathak when I got back from meeting with Albahinth? Seeing you, the warrior maid, like Eowyn, so strong and nonchalant, it really drove home how much had changed in a short time, more so than my own encounter with the sea beast." "Really? More than slaying a man-dragon? And you just passed it off. I lunged in the Italian mode. I was blown away. I was unsettled by all I'd learned from Albahinth, by the sea beasts and dragons, and then seeing you transformed. Lord Raglan and Joseph Campbell would be proud." "They help?" asked Three. "We go see?" Aunt Jenny and Sasha laughed, much to the scout's surprise. "No, my dear, they are people from home, but long and long ago, who wrote about having adventures and how people become heroes." "Like great ladies, you heroes." "We can only hope, Three." Three nodded in sage agreement. "You are," he said with confidence, and then went back to eating his stew and feeding bits to Rudy and Big Tom under the table. And so, surrounded by wonders, the trio ate the rest of their meal in silence, slept soundly in strange beds, and rejoined their dwarvish seaman companions on the talking boat on their journey to Patala, legendary home of the serpent folk, on a quest for a magic crown with which to defeat Lilith, mother of monsters, she who was once a dragon. That journey took them several leagues dawnward to the confluence of 2 rivers. From there they took the branch to the right, dawn by summerward, to the great dome-shaped mound of Patala. Up ahead they could see that the river flowed out of the mountain-sized dome through huge gates at the foot of which lay some sort of town or settlement. More towns were scattered across the great mound. "Well, here we go," said Sasha. "Time to dress the parts," Aunt Jenny replied, and they shed their cloaks and robes. Sasha stood tall in her gleaming fairy armor, without its rustic covering. Aunt Jenny's outfit combined her walking skirt and safari jacket with the spider silk padded armor and fairy mail. Her hair was pulled back and held in place by a circlet that had been a gift from Maeve. It was in the form of 3 intertwined sprigs wrought in silver, bearing small oak, ash, and thorn leaves fashioned from gold. She positioned herself at Kat's prow, Sasha behind her to the right and 3 to the left. The rumblers helped with Kat's sails and rigging. By the time they reached hailing distance of the gate, they'd drawn something of a crowd along the banks. As had been the case in Ilham Crown and elsewhere along their journey, that crowd was composed of many races or species. This time, however, the crowd was far less human. A few of the folk had roughly human shape, as much so as the fays and stone giants, but more, while bipedal, had long tails, outstretched and counterbalancing, or hanging down. Others slithered upon long snake-like bodies. A few had smooth skin, but most were scaled, and a large number sported feathers, either all over or the way that humans had hair, gracing their heads or in patches on parts of their bodies. A few sported wings. Kat hailed them in a loud, clear voice, with both a volume and a ceremonious tone they'd never heard before. "Comes now the Lady Jennifer, the 12th and last Queen of Avalon, healer, scholar, and teacher, to speak with His Majesty, King in Patala." A buzz went up among the crowd. More guards assembled, lined up shoulder to shoulder on either side of the gate. Atop the gate, a great serpent-bodied, winged and hooded figure raised himself and called out, "Hail the ship! Halt and await! Your arrival shall be relayed and announced." Kat creaked and groaned as the rumblers struck the sails, and she slowed herself by whatever means she traveled without them. "So far, so good," murmured Aunt Jenny. Several minutes passed. Kat maintained her position, as did the guards on shore. The crowd milled and grew, muttering and gossiping. "Some of them look like those feathered dinosaur reconstructions," Sasha observed. "I was thinking the very thing. And that long green and red fellow over there, can you see how stories of Quetzalcoatl could grow up around him? Yeah, and look at those, kind of like the Indian hooded serpent people. Wow. Definitely wow." "Hail the ship. You will be allowed in. Follow the red boat within the gates." And with that, the huge gates across the cave mouth began to open. "Raise just my mizzen," Kat said softly, and the rumblers hoisted it quickly. Slowly she made her way forward, then through the gate to the huge cavern within. There she was met by a large red craft bearing a handful of soldiers and moving under unknown power. "Strike the mizzen," ordered Kat, and followed under her own power. The pilot ship led them to a large dock several hundred yards in. The rumblers and several of the serpent folk quickly moored Kat. Aunt Jenny, Sasha, and 3 made their way to the rail and awaited permission to debark. Soon a tall, very humanoid figure in a blue uniform made his way to a point on the dock directly before Aunt Jenny and a few yards back. He was accompanied by half a dozen sauroid guards armed with swords and spears. "Human calling yourself Jennifer, His Royal Majesty, King within Patala and Lord of the Serpent Lands, bids you welcome and instructs me to bring you and your escort into his divine presence." "It will be an honor," she replied. Turning to the rumblers, she continued, "Stay here with Kat." They grumbled and nodded. Aunt Jenny settled her bag on her shoulder, faced forward, and nodded. Kat opened the gate in her railing, and Jenny, followed by Sasha, 3, Rudy, and Big Tom, stepped off onto the dock. Rudy and Big Tom immediately took their positions at her heels, and the 5 followed the blue-clad official flanked by the honor guard. At least, Jenny hoped it was an honor guard. The cavern was lit by torches, steady blue glowing orbs atop lampposts, and broad patches of the cavern walls and ceiling that glowed in a myriad colors. It was dimmer than the brilliant dawnish sun outside, but no darker than the duskward lands. Before long, it seemed almost normal. There was a whole bustling town or small city within the cavern. Stone and stucco buildings, gaily painted and of highly varying size, befitting the variety of forms of its denizens. All along the way, as they proceeded to the great central building that Aunt Jenny took to be the palace, they attracted small clusters and crowds, abuzz with chatter, virtually none of which she could make out, but clearly involving the human newcomers. The palace, if that's what it was more colorfully decorated than the rest of the town, just short of garishly so. Colored glass decorated most of its windows, and gemstones glittered in its gilded trim. Aunt Jenny spoke to Sasha in hushed tones. Notice the large sickle-shaped claw on those, just like Deinonychus or Velociraptor. Yes. If they are truly dinosaur people, then their culture would go back 65 million years, plus or minus the difference in how time flows here. Yeah, but they obviously don't have super science. That suggests that they don't have science as we know it, and haven't for hundreds of thousands or millions of years. It makes them totally alien from us. Absolutely. I hadn't thought of that. We need to be very careful what assumptions and expectations we have of them. They walked up to the palace steps in silence, taking in every detail about the place and the people that they could. Aunt Jenny, said Sasha softly. Yes? Pause for a minute and let me catch up. Certainly, my dear. Sasha stepped up next to Aunt Jenny and looked her in the eye. I'm not wearing heels, she said. Oh, said Jenny with surprise, and then studied Sasha for a long moment before continuing to climb the steps. You're taller, a couple of inches, taller and broader of shoulder. Amazonian, as befitting a warrior woman. Hell of a growth spurt, even given the longer time you've experienced here than I have. Living up to expectations, we become what we behold, are perceived to be. And I had to notice this now. This is important, and we need to discuss and think about it. And with that, they reached the top of the stairs and stood before the palace doors. Aunt Jenny paused to take it all in, the savage splendor of the place, the serpent guard that surrounded her, the talk with Sasha, and stepped forward, following the blue-clad official of the Serpent King. And we will meet His Serpentine Majesty next time.